reports from the world's second largest continent.
Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa.
We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South.
Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I am Gushin Galan, and here is the look at the top headlines. Russia blames Ukraine for a drone incursion in Romania, calling it a deliberate provocation, a day after Romania's foreign ministry summoned the Russian envoy over the incident. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio meets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as Washington voices concern over airstrikes on Qatar that could derail attempts at a Gaza ceasefire. The United States is very close to a deal with China to settle the TikTok dispute, which could face a US ban by September 17th, says the country's Treasury Secretary as trade talks resume in Madrid. Australia and Papua New Guinea's defence forces will be integrated under a new security pact to be signed this week. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says a Canberra move to curb China's influence in the region. And an Ankara court delays a key hearing into alleged vote buying that could shake Turkey's main opposition CHP party after at least 50,000 people protest ahead of the session. Hello and welcome. Let's start with Sudan. The US has slapped multiple targeted sanctions on the war-torn country since the conflict broke out between the army and the paramilitary in 2023. And the latest targets of the US sanctions are Sudanese Finance Minister Gebreil Ibrahim and a pro-army militia named BBMB. The sanctions on them were announced last week. In its statement, Washington called the finance minister and the militia quote-unquote Islamist actors who had ties with Iran. In fact, Washington has even long accused Tehran of destabilizing the region. The US said that Iranian regime was helping these so-called Sudanese Islamists to obstruct efforts to reach a ceasefire to end the war and fuel violence in the country. Now let's take a closer look at why US has imposed sanctions on the minister and the militia. The Sudanese finance minister, who has been sanctioned by the US, is the head of Justice and Equality Movement. It is an armed group that has been accused of destroying Sudanese towns and causing deaths and displacement of thousands of civilians. Washington also targeted the Sudanese minister over his visit to Tehran last year. Meanwhile, the US has imposed sanctions on the pro-army and militia BBMB for using training and weapons provided by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The US has accused the militia of arbitrary arrests, torture, and summary executions of those perceived to be aligned with the RSF. In fact, since the war in Sudan has entered its third year, over 1 million people have been killed and millions have been displaced so far. But despite multiple US sanctions on both the army and the RSF, weapons continue to flow into Sudan. Gold smuggling remains rampant, and the warring sides still appear financially resilient. So the question remains, are the targeted US sanctions actually helping in curbing the conflict, or are they making matters worse? Imposing sanctions is one part of America's strategy to push for peace in Sudan. The other part is playing a peacemaker. Last week, the US, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Egypt called for a humanitarian truce in Sudan, followed by a permanent ceasefire and a transition towards civilian rule However, the peace proposal suggested that no warring party should be part of that transition. And because of this clause, Sudan's army-aligned government has pushed back against the peace proposal. The paramilitary RSF has been accused of receiving support from one of the backers of the peace proposal, that is the UAE. However, Abu Dhabi has denied such allegations. With US pressure on one side and internal rivalries on the other, for now, the future of Sudan hangs in the balance. And in the midst of this are the desperate hopes for a better future of the millions of people trapped by the war. Now, for more on this, we have with us Meki El-Morabi, who is a former diplomat to the US and a Sudanese consultant. Mr. El-Morabi, welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to see you again.
What will be the implications of US sanctions on the Sudanese Finance Minister and the pro-army militia?
Actually, I don't call it sanction, because if you say sanction, you need a crime. Sanctions should be based on crimes. So it's a unilateral measures or action against the minister who didn't do any mistake. Gebreil Ibrahim is the minister of Sudan. There is no crime. There is no mistake. He's doing his job to protect the Sudanese economy. He visited Iran, he visited Saudi Arabia, he visited United States, participated in several conferences. That is for the economy of Sudan. Even United European Union officials, they visited Iran. Even US delegation, they met with Iran. So nothing wrong with the finance minister doing his job. And that doesn't deserve sanctions, that deserve to be honored for this. Al-Baraa Bin Malik, or the group that's supporting army, is not just one group, several groups. They are supporting the army, they are defending, they are fighting the militia. Even the Department of State itself, in its statement, they said that they recruited 20,000 Sudanese fighters to fight the militia. And the United States itself, they classified the militia as practicing genocide against the Sudanese people. So if the militia is the enemy of the United States doing genocide in Sudan, so that you cannot sanction or make any unilateral action against the people who are fighting the terrorist group of the RSF, the genocidal militia.
Mr. El-Morabi, critics have questioned the role of US sanctions in curbing the Sudan conflict. Is it actually helping the war-torn country, or is it instead exacerbating the conflict?
It's not helping both sides. It's damaging for Sudan, damaging for the United States, for the economy. If you push something away from you, you push it closer to others. So United States pushing country away from the United States and accusing China and Russia of getting advantage of that. Just last week, Trump said, we lost India to China and Russia. Then he changed. He said, no, they are still my friend. So what is the wrong? The wrong with the United States foreign policy. It is not a stable foreign policy. And also the issue of the Islamist, all people, they know that this is not a serious issue. What is the message that they want to send about Islamist? Trump himself, he shook hands with Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, who once part of Al-Qaeda and still Islamist, an active Islamist with a long beard and Islamic attitude and Islamic orientation. They shook hands with him and they lift the sanction. He didn't change his ideology, but it is politics. Now, 2 days ago, Trump delegation and special envoy Adam Boller, he is in Afghanistan to meet with Taliban. The Houthi has negotiation with the United States. So nothing wrong with being an Islamist. It's a choice of people. Even in Israeli Knesset, there is a Muslim Brotherhood member elected inside Israel who belongs to the Islamic movement in South Israel. That means the issue of the ideology for us as political analysts and experts in the foreign policy, we know that is the wrong message and it is false. False justification for sanction. But the problem is that now United States send a message to the Sudanese population, who are the majority, closer to Islamic orientation. The message is very bad, that we don't need you anymore, and we don't need the people that they are fighting against the genocidal militia. And that is a wrong message and not helping for U.S.-Sudanese relation. But still, Sudan will not stop direct talks with United States. United States, before they sanctioned 2 Turkish ministers, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Interior, they sanctioned them in 2016, and then they had negotiation and they lifted the sanction in 2018. So sanctioning a minister will not stop direct talks with United States. Sudan was under the sanction for 20 years and then lifted after negotiation. I was there at Sudan Embassy in the United States when there was a negotiation between Sudan and United States. And still now there are direct talks between Sudan and United States.
Interesting observations there, Mr. Al-Morabi. That was Meki Al-Morabi, who is a former diplomat to the US and a Sudanese consultant. Thank you for sharing your insights with Firstpost.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shifting focus to Ghana, the latest African nation to receive third country deportees from the United States. But these deportations are now at the center of a legal showdown in Washington, as a federal judge has raised serious questions for the Trump administration. A US judge says the Ghana deportations appear to be a way to circumvent immigration laws, calling it a deliberate scheme to ignore court-ordered protections for migrants who face persecution in their home countries. The remarks came from Tanya Chutkan, an Obama-appointed judge based in Washington. She called an emergency hearing after lawyers warned that their clients could be forced back to their home country where they fear torture or persecution. The group, including 3 Nigerians and 2 Gambians, filed a legal complaint saying they were secretly flown out of a Louisiana detention center, shackled on a military cargo plane, and left in Ghana without notice. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama confirmed last week that his country struck a deal with the US to accept West African deportees and had already received 14 people. However, lawyers say 5 of those had existing US court protections blocking their return. In fact, at least 1 was later sent to Gambia, a bisexual man now at a risk in a country that criminalizes same-sex relations. In court, the US Department of Justice argued it no longer had custody of the migrants and claimed the court lacked authority over diplomatic actions. It also cited a Supreme Court ruling that allows migrants to be sent to nations other than their own. Now, Judge Chutkan rejected that position as disingenuous. She pressed the Justice Department, calling the move an end run to bypass legal protections. She said the US could retrieve the migrants, transfer them to safe countries, or warn Ghana it is violating agreements. However, she also noted that her hands are tied in the situation. The Trump administration has expanded third country deportations as part of its immigration crackdown. So far, migrants have been sent to Panama, El Salvador, South Sudan, Eswatini, Rwanda, Uganda, and now Ghana. But the legal battle exposes controversy over the policy, with critics calling it ethically questionable and warning that host nations are being used as dumping grounds for migrants. As Ghana receives deportees, the public remains split. Some see it as pan-African solidarity. Others raise economic and social concerns.
This is the genesis of Pan-African. Nkrumah did everything. So it's a good idea to have them. Just that we have some consequences, some prices to pay. And that is normal. But to receive West African nationals in Ghana is a good idea.
The idea of our President John Dramani Mahama receiving these deportees, on the contrary, is going to be a big headache to the Ghanaian economy. because we do not know who these people are and what they are up to in America that they will be deported to here. So for me, I strongly disagree with His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, and I don't want them to come. Everyone should go to their various countries in order to start to rebuild their future.
So as the Trump administration continues with the controversial Third World Deportation Plan, it faces growing scrutiny over a policy many see as outsourcing responsibility. And amid this, the fate of these deportees remains uncertain. Our next story is from Libya. Libya's Tripoli-based UN-recognized government has reportedly reached a deal with a powerful armed group to end months of violence in the capital. Reports claim that behind this peace deal is Turkey, which is seeking to emerge as a mediator in Africa. Negotiations between the Libyan government and the Rada force were reportedly felicitated by Turkey. Authorities say the details of the accord will be announced later, but so far neither Rada nor the government have issued official statements. However, Libyan media has widely reported the development. Libya remains deeply divided and unstable more than a decade after the NATO-backed uprising that toppled the longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The country is still split between the UN-recognized government in the west and a rival administration in the east, backed by military commander Khalifa Haftar. Now, even though Tripoli is under the government of national unity, it is far from a coherent authority. Multiple armed groups control neighborhoods, checkpoints, and even parts of the economy in the capital. And while officially linked to state institutions, these groups compete for territory, revenue streams, and political influence. In fact, tensions escalated back in May this year when the GNU launched a security push to dismantle militias operating outside state control. Heavy gunfire, artillery, and explosions rocked Tripoli, forcing residents to stay indoors. One of the main targets was the Rada force. Formed in 2011, Rada has grown into one of Tripoli's most powerful Islamist-leaning armed groups. It controls Mitiga Airport, the capital's only functional airport, and runs detention centers. It has also been accused of smuggling, manipulating customs, and even human trafficking. Now, the May clashes were among the most violent in recent years. Fighters used machine guns, RPGs, mortars, and truck-mounted artillery inside densely populated areas. Even hospitals reported dozens dead and more than 100 wounded as street battles raged for 3 days before a fragile ceasefire. Reports now say the two parties have agreed to a neutral and unified force to manage and secure 4 airports in western Libya, including Mitiga. The deal reports credit to Turkey for its exceptional efforts, along with the UN mission in Libya for essential and decisive mediation. Speaking of Turkey, the country is a long-time ally of the Tripoli government. During the 2019 to 2020 war for Tripoli, it sent military advisors, drones, air defense systems, and Syrian fighters to help push back Haftar's forces. And now, under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey has positioned itself as a regional mediator. It has successfully helped resolve a dispute between Ethiopia and Somalia over a port deal and has offered to mediate in Sudan's conflict as well. But the big question remains, can this deal and Turkey's mediation really bring lasting peace to Libya? Or is it just another fragile truce in a country still torn by divisions? And for our last story, let's move to Sahel. Burkina Faso has scrapped visa fees for African travelers. The junta-led government wants to boost regional integration and tourism by making it easier for African travelers to visit the country. The country's security minister made the announcement last week after a cabinet meeting that was chaired by the junta head, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Though the visa fees has been waived, African travellers still need to submit an online visa application, which will be reviewed before approval. Citizens of West African countries can already enter Burkina Faso without a visa. However, after the exit of Burkina Faso from the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS, this policy could change in the future. Burkina Faso's move to scrap visa fees for African travellers is part of a broader trend among West African countries. Nations like Ghana, Rwanda and Kenya have eased travel requirements for African citizens in recent years. Ghana said earlier this year that all African passport holders can visit visa-free. Rwanda, on the other hand, already allows visa-free entry. And Kenya has also officially eliminated visa requirements for almost all African countries except for Somalia and Libya due to security concerns. The African Union has also been pushing for easier travel across the continent. The Union has supported plans for a single African passport to make movement between countries simpler. The head of Burkina Faso's junta captain, Ibrahim Traoré, took power in a coup in 2022. He has often described himself as a supporter of Pan-African unity and a staunch critic of the West and colonialism. Traoré is popular among young people on social media, and though he is widely praised, his government is also being criticized for poor management of security challenges. And just like its Sahel neighbors, Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso is also battling armed groups, and around 40% of the country is under the control of these groups. After Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger exited ECOWAS earlier this year, their security and trade wars have worsened. And despite Traoré's promises to restore security and help from Russian mercenaries, peace in the region remains elusive. Traoré's move to scrap visa fees for African travellers is a strategic move to gain support from its neighbours to boost its economy, despite its exit from the West African Regional Bloc. That's it on the show today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thanks for watching.
It's over! He's done it again! Unbelievable!
Oh, straight into the roof of the net.
Nice one.
Straight down the middle. So a good performance from both teams here today.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost. My name is Pratik Vinod. Let's get started. On the show today, the India versus Pakistan clash at the Asia Cup turned into yet another one-sided contest. But this time, the story wasn't about India's dominant win. It was about a no-handshake row, empty stands and a national anthem mix-up that left Pakistan red-faced. With fans already boycotting the fixture and Indian players showing their stance, the big question now is, should India even continue playing Pakistan given the massive difference in quality and the toxic backdrop? Next up, in Spain, a major cycling race was thrown into chaos after pro-Palestinian demonstrations erupted. Over 100,000 protesters clashed with 1,000 policemen. The grand finale descended into a stampede-like situation, raising a serious question: can global sport